Hello and welcome to another episode of What Do You Call It podcast. I'm your host, GB. I've got my boy Rye back with me for a special episode. Normally, I would interview a guest, wrestling, films, football, MMA, anything. But this episode's a bit different. On March 14th, 2022, less than 2 weeks ago, the wrestling world sadly lost a wrestling legends. Scott Hall, also known as Ramon. The guy changed the industry. Without Scott Hall, I think wrestling would be very different. I put this on my Twitter at the time of his passing. I basically said we probably wouldn't have the NWO, the Monday Night Wars, DX, guaranteed contracts, Bullet Club, the Elite, and the list goes on. Ryan, I want to thank you for coming on. I know you've been on the show before. Last time it was more positive way, but I know you were gutted about his passing. We were both lucky enough to meet him. We will talk about that in a moment. But before we do chat about that event, his career and moments, I want to ask you first, what was your first memory of Scott Hall as a wrestling fan?
Hey,
there's going to be a lot of impressions by Ryan in this episode. I'm all for it.
No, I had to do it.
I
feel like it's the right thing to do. Look, literally, my first memory of Scott Hall is obviously the Razor Ramon gimmick. That's when I was growing up. I was watching a lot of, as you know, just for your viewing public, I was watching a lot of the sort of early 90s, even late 80s on VHS, even though I was born in 90, catching up with a lot of the old WWE stuff, WWF obviously at the time, and Razor Ramon was, as many people regularly say now, the first kind of liked heel wrestler, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
And a lot of people say he made it cool to be the bad guy. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And even as a young kid, I kind of picked up on it. Like, I found myself at the telly chanting Razor when I was meant to be cheering the other guy, and he kind of had that appeal. And he obviously had the size. He was big. He was strong. He had everything going for him. And then the Scarface gimmick, the little vignettes, and I just got a buzz off it. I thought it was cool. Everyone was loving Hogan, and to me, it was too green. I wanted something a bit edgy, and Razor was the answer to that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like the golden era, so they were larger than life characters, but Razor Ramon, no pun intended, but had that edge to him. There wasn't anyone like him. He was the cool bad guy. It was hard to, not to cheer him, and eventually he would turn babyface after having a run with 1, 2, 3 kids. And obviously he wouldn't actually turn heel until he would join WCW. I mean, his run in WWE was phenomenal. He was only there for like 4 years when you actually think about it. And he achieved so much. He was a 4-time Intercontinental Champion. I think he pretty much, elevated the ladder match. I know it was technically Bret and Shawn, but that wasn't actually aired on TV, where Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon, that match WrestleMania 10. I mean,
the thing is as well, man, like, you got to remember, it's the first ladder match at Mania. So, I mean, for that alone, I mean, Mania is where everybody watches, even the more casual fans will probably catch Mania, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where it was showcased. And when you were mentioning 1, 2, 3 there, obviously mentioning Sean Waltman, like you've got to look back at the relationships Razor had outside of the ring. Yeah. And I think most of his best work was done with his closest friends. And the chemistry showed.
I agree with that.
Because you said the work with Waltman, the work with Sean in the ladder match.
Yeah, even Diesel. Like, they had some really good matches.
And Diesel as well. Obviously, when Sean and Diesel were the heels and Razor was the face and all that kind of stuff, it was clear to see, but now, as years gone on and he went to WCW, you understood he had close relationships with those guys in the back. Yeah. In WWF, when it wasn't maybe as well known, it was clear in the ring there was a great chemistry between them all.
Yeah.
And obviously, but a lot of people say it's a shame that he was never WWF champion, and I've always thought about myself. But then the last few years, looking back at a lot of different shows and podcasts,
did he really need the belt?
Well, this is it, because I was thinking if he had the belt and he was being mega pushed, would he have gone to WCW? And
Probably
then that would have been a major shame, because obviously his best years and biggest push was WCW. And I'll leave you to lead into maybe the start of the WCW.
There is something, just before we do jump into him joining WCW, well, technically returning, because he was there as Diamond Stud, but that's just me being an absolute smart. But there is actually one other person I think he had really good chemistry with that we've not mentioned, Bret Hart, they had two great matches on pay-per-view in '93, Royal Rumble, and I'm not going through like his whole career, but these just stand out to me. I thought they really, really clicked, especially the match at King of the Ring. I know he
lot of
lost
people
both
say, a lot of people say, mate, don't they, that Bret Hart is one of them wrestlers that could get a match out of the post box and whatever. But look, the thing is that I do believe there are wrestlers. AJ Styles comes to mind immediately. Daniel Bryan, you can get a match out of more stiff wrestlers, right? But I still always think you need a bit of a dance partner. I mean, it's very, very rare.
It does
that you
take
don't have
two
a
to
dance
tango.
partner.
Yeah.
They don't need to be the most technically sound, but they need to have a charisma. They need to carry themselves well in the ring, sell the moves well. And as you mentioned, Razor and Brett had some great clashes.
They did. There's one thing I love about Razor, and I don't think to this day I've seen it done so well. His worked punches. Oh, chef's kiss for that one. Just the way the snap on them and the delivery on them. Oh, they just look so good. Like you were actually getting walloped in the face.
I'm not going to rip off someone else's work. There's a video I saw the other day in tribute to Razor, and they did mention this, and they said that other than just the punches, it was when Razor hit someone with a power move. He would
like the fall-away slam.
Yeah, like you'd look at that person and think, oh, they're hurt. Like, that actually hurts, because he'd be giving them time to sell it on the floor. He wouldn't be jumping on them for another move. Sorry, he'd be boasting in the corner or getting the crowd.
Like he knew where the cameras were. You noticed that?
Yeah, getting the crowd heat up and waiting for them to sell the move as if it really hurt. And I think that made a big impact. He's a 6'6" guy, powerhouse. He's not 6'7".
Like if you look at Razor's Edge,
I've stood next to him.
it does look in a way. Depends who does it. Not necessarily Scott Hall, but like if you do it, you see sometimes it just looks like soft as shit. But the way he did it, because of his height, obviously that had an advantage. But like, it looks impactful, but no one ever got hurt from it.
No, I was literally about to lead on to that. Another thing, great workup, because you look at a move like the Razor's Edge, the Outsider's Edge, whatever you want to call it. That move done wrong from that height.
It literally was done not long ago. Sorry to cut you off just quickly, but it was done on NXT, the new one. I don't necessarily watch it anymore, but I saw it on Twitter and I saw a clip of it, and it was actually, I think it was just before he passed away actually, and I saw it. I was like, oh, it was like a Razor's Edge, but power bomb, and it just did not look good. Like his head bounced back, and it just. Oh,
yeah. Well, we've seen a little tiny bit off topic. We've seen with the Big E injury recently, Raw wrestling has to be as well after as possible. And I think if you look at some of the power moves, like you mentioned, a good one, the fall away slam, the one-handed choke slam as well is another trademark. You've got some good
I like that move.
Kind of moves that Scott Hall would regularly put into his matches, and they're all big moves. You have a powerful guy, big built, muscle built guy. If any of these moves were done wrong, you'd know. And I don't remember. I
don't recall. Not even Bret Hart. He does
backstages or anyone shooting on Scott Hall saying he injured
another
him.
thing.
I don't remember this.
Not necessarily the power moves, and I'm glad you did mention that because they always look so impactful. But I think he doesn't necessarily get enough credit for how much he sold for his opponents. Even if it was a jobber, he would still give them a few moves.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Sean Mortman match was originally almost a jobber, wasn't it? Coming through when he was the very first coming through, and he obviously, I heard Scott actually interview about that, and he said he wanted to give the guy, a moment. He wanted to. He agreed to take the loss. He agreed to do the match, and he wanted to do it. He could see a future in him, and obviously, we know they got great chemistry backstage. They become like very best of friends, but. As you say, that's another great characteristic in a big over wrestler is to want to give someone else a shot as well. When you mentioned selling, I have got to go on to the stunner, which I'm not sure if that was quite rightly sold or a bit.
I loved it personally.
It's a
moment,
going to
disagree with you, Ryan. I'm going to disagree. You're my mate, but I'm going to disagree. I fucking loved it. He did,
it's a moment.
Did it once,
I'll give you that.
and then he did it again. It's just the way he jumps. I mean, if you found that questionable, what did you think? A little bit off topic, but I want to know because I think listeners are going to mention it. The Rock selling of the stunner.
I thought it was gimmicky, but good in a way. And what I was about to mention as well was the Scott Hall thing. It might have been oversold, but it did create a moment, and it was gimmicky and it was funny.
I mean, the match. What else do you remember?
That was never meant to look like a genuine reaction. It was just meant to create a crowd buzz, and it did do that. So it was funny. They must have spoke about it, and it was a great little moment.
They were actually good friends, but they did not click. And to be fair, both of them weren't in good places at the time. Scott Hall, I don't know how true it was, but he went out the night before, and Austin, after he would actually eventually walk out like a month or two later, and I think he actually walked out the night after, and then walked out again, and then we didn't see him for a year. But they were actually good friends. But we're going to talk about him joining WCW, the Monday Night Wars, as I mentioned in the intro. You people
best period in wrestling.
Who I am.
Am I right in saying that?
What was that?
Best period in wrestling. Am I right in saying that?
I mean, Look,
Gotta be, right?
I'm gonna have to agree. It was. I mean, yeah, I grew up before it, but in terms of the Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars, I mean, that was just at its peak. It's never going to get like that. I'm sorry when people say the Wednesday Night Wars. Sorry, just behave. Like it's not.
No.
It's not the case.
There's a standout phrase as well that signified the beginning of all of this, and he said it: "You want a war? You're going to get one."
Mm-hmm.
And
But
it stands true because that literally set the tone for all of it. It was Nash and Hall coming into WCW. Props to Eric Bischoff here, by the way. This was amazing work, but
absolutely
made them play WWF guys invading WCW without mentioning the brand,
mm-hmm.
and already having them on his payroll.
WWF names as well.
It was exceptionally well done because you watched that and you thought, I remember watching it with my granddad years ago, and I watched it and I went, Granddad, they're WWF guys. Now they're going to come over and fight WCW guys. This is going to be really good, you know. And not once did they mention the company name, but they insinuated it.
Yeah, they'd be like,
and they got it over
north,
so
or
well.
from New York, like sort of little things like that.
Yeah,
he still had the mannerisms.
Everyone was going like,
that was Scott Hall.
Yeah, he was doing it for a couple of weeks on his own, wasn't he?
Yeah,
before Nash,
and then before he got Nash in, like the big guy.
That's why I say he started the whole Monday Night War. He started the whole thing.
And the fact that just because he wanted just a little bit more money, and he wanted to go to Japan for a few dates so he can get paid there as well. And Vince was just like, I don't know, I need Mark Mero. I don't actually know that's the case. I mean, the last bit, but the first bit was true. Scott Hall himself said that in past interviews. And it's just, it's crazy. Like, if he had stayed, would we be having this conversation? Like, just, not talk about his passing, but in terms of the Attitude Era, the NWO, and you know, those rumors
we'd give him a tribute, I'm sure, but we'd have said something like the WrestleMania match, the IC title run, and where else can you go? I mean, there wasn't the Monday Night Wars.
I mean, sadly, the last few things of his WWE run, you know, I think I can see why he wanted to like go away. Was a diaper match with 1-2-3 Kid, who's his mate, but he's just come back from a stinker, well, not stinker, but an odd feud with Goldust that he didn't feel comfortable with, and losing to Vader.
That wasn't a good feud.
No, it's just because he felt uncomfortable knowing that, and then they put him in that position, you know, when his wife's watching it as well, and I can understand it. And I understand business is business, but that was the time when it sort of, this was kind of new and, you know, very like
yeah. But look, Monday Night Wars, obviously, as you said, Nash then come into it, and then obviously the Hogan turn, which is obviously synonymous with the biggest heel turn in wrestling and one of the biggest moments in wrestling.
Probably is. Yeah, it probably is.
But you know, Hall, obviously not the star at that moment. That's probably Hogan, but he's there. He's one of the guys.
Wouldn't have worked without Scott Hall.
His whole thing off. You know,
I don't care what anyone says. You put Savio Vega in that position, it's just not going to take off, right?
No, because you need charisma. And
yeah, like, you know, to me, for like about a year or two, he was still probably my favorite NWO member, if I'm being honest. Like him and Nash and Hall, when Waltman would join, like the Outsiders, and just they still had that click element. They were the cool guys. I mean, Hogan was cool, but it kind of lost that coolness quite quick, in my opinion.
The NWO grew, and it grew too big, and it became, as we spoke about on previous videos.
I mean, we spoke about it with other wrestlers. Countless of YouTube videos have mentioned the downfall of the NWO, the rise of the NWO, and the Monday Night Wars. We won't harp on it too much.
No, of course not. But what I'm saying is, as big as it grew, Hall, Nash, and Waltman remained cool. It doesn't matter how big that group was. You noticed them guys because they had the charisma.
Yeah. I really like their feud, and it's one of those feuds I've had to go back and appreciate more. It's the feud with Piper and Flair.
Yeah,
like it was just really good because they generally, like, there was a backstage heat as well, and I do remember Kevin Nash did the Arn Anderson impression. I mean, I shouldn't laugh because like that you actually find out it pissed off Arn Anderson and Flair.
It did quite a lot, yeah.
my dog spot, it just like they were my guys, the NWO, man. I'm gonna cheer for them.
Well, this is it. This is what Hall did in WWF. He became the first guy you cheered for who was a heel. Yeah. And obviously he brought that to WCW, and then the NWO were the heel faction, but they were immediately cheered. And you go back to watching 95, 96, 97 WCW, every 1 in 2 members of the audience is wearing an NWO shirt. I mean, it took over. It was global.
And he did like the survey. Oh, I make the survey, man. And just the promos, like, if you notice, anytime he got it, if the word would be saying it word for word, so the crowd would be following every word. They'd be listening. And
one thing I think that the what do you call it podcast audience would love to hear is their host give a survey.
I'll let you do it. I'll let you do it because you do
No,
quite.
no,
You're
this
doing
is
the
for
voice.
you.
You're no,
You're my
yeah,
host.
no. You're a co-host for this episode, right? And because you do quite a good Scott Hall impression, I'm going to allow you to do it, man. Honestly, like that. This isn't a I'm co-hosting or hosting. We're both just celebrating one of our favorite wrestlers that passed
That's
away.
very true. That's very true. So
I'll let you do it, bro.
if I mess this up completely, then bear with me.
We'll see it in the comments. Don't worry.
Hey yo,
Up in the
who
crowd.
came here to see WCW? Or who came here to see the
NWO?
survey says one more for the good guys.
Love
There you
it.
go.
Love it. There is another quote that I want you to do in a minute, but I just want to talk about like
I know where you're going
his
with
return.
this. I know exactly where you're going with
It's I want you to do it, man. With like for the listeners, right? They're probably like they don't know why we're laughing, right? And I'm not cutting any of this. This is just like I told you. This is
You know what? This is a different type of video. It's two lifelong friends remembering someone who changed their childhood. And
yeah, man.
I'm hoping people appreciate it for what it is. We're going to get things wrong. We're going to say goofy things.
Like, I'm not like looking on Wikipedia like some certain host that lives in Canada. No, that's not a dig. But yeah, like I'm just literally like talking to you, having a laugh. There's things I'm probably getting necessarily wrong myself. But I will always have those memories. But there is a few things I want to talk about just before I get you. I'm gonna get you to that impression. When not Macho Man. Yeah, it actually is involved Macho Man. When Ric Flair wins the title. It's on YouTube, by the way. So we'll do it in a minute. Anyway, there's a few things I want to mention. Scott Hall. So we talked about his run. Obviously, his run in WWE didn't necessarily end in a high. He would ultimately be released. There was a few issues. He'd actually had one moment in ECW. Wasn't televised. It was really cool. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed that. Comes out to Fuji, ready or not. Wrestle's just incredible. Another person probably owes his career to Scott Hall and let him travel with him. You know, there's so many people.
Yeah, I've heard that actually. I saw that the other day. I saw a more in-depth talk, which I hadn't seen in the past, with Just Incredible, where he mentioned that he was kind of like jobbing and not really getting over. And he went on the road with Scott, and Scott taught him so much ring craft and charisma in the ring and to build a character, and kind of gave him a chance, really. Which is really cool.
Because Just Incredible was traveling with the road agents, and Scott was like, no. You'll look like a stooge. And he has confirmed, a lot of people do forget, Just Incredible was actually, it was a clip member. That has been confirmed by other clip members.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. And that's, you know, I think I know a lot about the clips, so you learn something new every day.
Hey, there you go. I bet someone like, no, he wasn't. It's like, fuck off, he was. He actually was. Like, it's on YouTube. You can find it. Like, I'm not.
Yeah, no, I believe you. That's cool. That's cool.
But he would actually return to WWE 2002. Up until Mania, I thought it was awesome. Like the promo Vince cuts, I'm gonna inject it with a lethal dose, and he spins the chairs like the NWO. It's awesome, and that promo awesome. That they cut at No Way Out. And soon I think Scott Hall's the first one to speak, and he's just like, and he pauses it, holds it in for a bit, and he's like, "Hey yo," and the fans go apeshit.
I love that first promo they did when they acted like we're only here for a chance. We want to work with some of the wrestlers. We're the good guys, you know.
I love it.
You know, all this like, and everybody watching knew this was absolute nonsense.
Yeah,
like, everybody knew.
But
the way they delivered it was still great. And
yeah.
But going back to the Vince thing with the NWO chair and all that, like that gave me so much hype that I did like WWE NWO. I did like it, but it wasn't a patch on WCW NWO.
Yeah.
And I really had slightly higher expectations for it. And as you mentioned, Hall wasn't there for too long. Yeah. He had his own demons.
He had his own issues. Kevin Nash was injured, and Hulk Hogan. Yeah. The fans loved him. They just couldn't turn their backs on him.
They had to turn him face because he was just getting cheered in every arena. So
yeah, I mean that match against The Rock. I mean, but we're not here to talk about Hulk Hogan. But I mean, I think anyone's listening to this episode is going to know exactly what we're talking about. But the promo that I think is very underrated. That moment, they're out there for about 10 minutes, but the fans are loving it. It's just visually, it's cool to see all three of them in the ring, which probably hasn't been seen at that time. I don't know, since like 1997.
I think moments like that, and I think, you know, standout promos and that in the WWF or WWE early WWE days were massively helped by, again, this is a video again about Scott Hall, so very quickly touching on this. Definitely. One of, in my opinion, the #1 ring announcer of all time, which is JR, who makes these moments, I think, in my opinion. And when he's like, I never thought I'd see these three guys back in a ring, and, you know, it just really gets behind it. And, you know, you get the... He tried to give you flashbacks of Monday Night Wars, like mentioning it, if that makes sense. It was really well done.
Yeah,
and
not like when Sting wrestled Triple H at fucking, which involves Scott Hall taking a bump, which is awesome. Like, it's a fucking pacemaker. But like the commentary, JBL and Carl, the Monday Night Wars are over. So they've been over for like 16 years. For fuck's sake.
Yeah.
That pissed me off, but that's another story. But
I heard about very quickly. Cool. I heard a really bad report on that match today. It was like Mania history or something. And look, it wasn't a technical wrestling match.
I like it. I still like
it. All the faces that turn up during that match, all the legends in that match in the ring, you just have a moment.
Fans loved it.
You can't
it
go
was
against
fun. Like Sting was 56 or something. Triple H wasn't a young guy, and it was. I thought it was a fun match. I do feel if I rewatch it,
I think they went quite well. I think they took some bumps. I think it was a good match.
I think some fans are still sour because Triple H won. Okay, maybe shouldn't have, but it's done. There's not much you can do about it. And people still, should have been Undertaker. Well, it's just not happening. Get over it. Like, move on. Yeah. Get over it.
I liked it. I like the way that Triple H being in it.
The build is good as well. Build is really good.
I probably did want it to be Taker at one point, but it didn't work out that way. It ended up being Triple H. And Triple H bringing DX and NWO together, where he's got relationships with the Click, relationships with DX. It was cool. He was probably responsible for most of it, and it was cool.
It was cool. I really like that moment. There's a few things I want to go back on. One thing I really like about Scott Hall, right, and it wasn't in the best state, but I really appreciate like what he did. Basically, there was you might have seen it on YouTube. There's a clip where a comedian makes a joke about Owen Hart. He says, Iron Sheik's career fell faster than Owen Hart did, to his death, right? And it just didn't go down well. You're in a room full of wrestlers, right? And Scott Hall, right, he's strong, but it's got like why he's doing it. He reacts and wants to kick the shit out of this comedian because he was really close. Bret Hart's confirmed this, by the way, that they were actually really close. I think they traveled in Europe and they wrestled a lot, and they were just friends.
I've seen pictures of Owen and Scott.
Yeah, but people only remember Scott Hall for that moment. Being people try to put it like he's in the wrong. It's like no, he's sticking up for his friend that tragically died, like a horrific death. And it's the fact that he's literally going out of his way to make it be known that that's not okay to say that about my friend. And I really respect that. Okay, fair enough.
It's definitely not fair to say that.
But his heart's in the right place, 100%.
And another thing which leads back a bit to Scott Hall, and I loved the influence Scott Hall had on my life. It'd be hard to say I loved Scott Hall. I didn't know him well enough, but I respect Scott Hall so greatly. And when he was on there's a well-known kind of downfall video, which is hard to watch, but obviously
is it the ESPN one?
I think it may be. It's
when Steph says like, "Oh, we've paid for him." Like,
yes, it is that video. But it's when you see this absolute dickhead, and I will call him out if he's watching. Dickhead promoter who brings Scott Hall to an event, pushes him in front of the curtain, and when he mentions sticking up for your friend, Sean Waltman is behind Scott there, and he's like, "You're going to push him out in front of a live crowd."
It was just incredible.
It was also Waltman. I saw it literally yesterday. No, he's talking about the footage, mate.
He's there. He's in the interview. No, I'm not denying that, but he wasn't actually at the show. It was actually
he wrestles. He wrestles with Just Incredible in the show. Yeah, Scott does. He wrestles with Just Incredible.
No, we're getting confused. Right, what I'm saying is Waltman was on the documentary talking about it, pissed off, but he wasn't actually at the show. Scott Hall wasn't.
No, I'm saying he wasn't at the show. He was reflecting on the
moment. Yeah, perfect. We got really confused. People are going to be like, "What the fuck is going on about?" Anyway, continue.
This is what we mean about a live show.
Yeah, that's it, man. Well, it's not live, but I'm not going to edit this.
I
will edit it.
So that's the thing. The thing is, right, as I say, Scott Hall defended Owen Hart and Sean Waltman defended Scott Hall. And what I'm trying to say by that is that in the wrestling industry, some people don't like the Click, some people do, but what comes around goes around, and you stick up for your friends. And them guys are thicker than blood, they would look after each other. And when Scott was on hard times and someone's still pushing him in front of the curtain when he can't even stand properly, it's so hard to watch.
It's really
there's actually idiots in the crowd as well heckling him about relapsing and stuff. I mean, look, it's hard to see. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's an upsetting moment. But the idea is that just Click guys, they stay strong, they back each other, and
But the thing, he'd actually been at hospital. Like it wasn't. It's just fucked the situation. I mean, anyone hasn't seen what we're talking about, what we just sort of went back and forth on prior to Ryan actually explained it. It is on YouTube. Just put Scott Hall ESPN. It was before the resurrection of Jake Snake documentary and DDP Yoga and the Hall of Fame. But it sort of makes you appreciate what DDP did for Scott Hall, which I want to talk about because I'll be honest, I don't really want to talk about his TNA run. There isn't really a lot to say. A lot of it was just him getting sacks and just basically not putting on good performances.
I can quickly pick out two highlights from the TNA run.
The Kingsland Wrestling.
No, it's not that. That's it's the theme music.
Yes, good shout. I love that song.
And it is the reunion, be it very short, when they do another
No,
heel
you can
turn
fuck right off
young,
that one. No, I was with you on this one, but no, the band.
and they
I
get
remember
back
when we used
together,
to in
and it's,
college.
it's a little
I'm gonna keep
moment.
fuck it, my hair's awful, but I remember like he just used to go, "Oh, we're the band" when we spend nights out, and just I was just like, "No, we're not." I hated it. And I like Eric Young, right, but he had no place. Like he did not belong in the clique or the rebrand or whatever it was.
No, they heel turned on him though, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I think he joined. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the story. He had Bubba the Love Sponge, and you know
it was
they turned on
Nash
Scott
and
Hall,
Young.
Kevin Nash, and then Nash turned on them, and then they were tag team
Yeah, it was
champions.
Nash and Young against Six and Scott Hall, and
Sadly,
Six and
I
Scott
actually
Hall
remember this.
won. They got TNA contracts, and Nash gets in the match, goes to hit Scott Hall, power bombs Young, and then tags himself out, and then allows Scott Hall and Six to double pin Eric Young. And they all start throwing the band back together, playing a distorted version of the Walk Patching,
Yeah.
trying to relive the 90s. And it look, as I said, not great, but
I thought it was shit personally. Like
nostalgia.
NWO 2002, which I honestly I've got a soft spot for it. Like, I remember like Walkman. I hated when Booker T joined. Like, oh, he wasn't an original member, but I didn't mind not Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels, because he's part of the clique and they were actually friends. So I didn't mind him in it. But that's just me being nitpicking, a bit of a mark. But the TNA run, because I think he had like 3 runs there. The original one when it was like in Nashville, it was owned by the Jarretts. And he wasn't too bad. He was in shape. Him and Jarrett actually had a fun match. I actually watched that not long ago. Don't ask why. It was before his death. But the TNA one, the less said, the better. Fucking dreadful. That's that last one.
I think this is where I say people are trying to get the best Scott Hall when the guy is struggling in life. And
yeah, I mean, he wasn't in a good place in life. Like no one, time waits for no man in terms of like your age, and you know, there's only so much you can do in terms of your body. Of the injuries are going to pile up as well. And you watch the matches. I think it was against the Dudley boys. It was just sad. And like, it wasn't, not to say he was at fault of this. Dudley's weren't exactly, in my opinion, I think they're a bit overrated, especially in TNA. I just didn't really enjoy their work. That's
they're known for like high spots and
yeah, like a lot of
stipulation carry matches. A long match, you probably lose momentum halfway through.
Give me some Steiner brother matches over the Dudley boys matches. I honestly mean that. That's probably a controversial take, but Steiner brothers all day long for me. One.
Holler if you hear me.
Holler if you hear me. Sorry, I'm talking about Scott Hall, not Scott Steiner, but we could actually do another episode on that.
I actually heard about Scott Hall though being Scott Steiner, being with Scott Hall when he passed. Is that true? Have you heard that?
I don't believe so. I know DDP was the one that found him, and then they went for the hip surgery because he fell over and he actually been on the floor for a while. So like DDP went to check on him, and then obviously a few days, and then Walton was actually going to live with him. Because one thing I noticed, we are going to go back to positive, but one thing I did notice was quite sad was, you know, when the NWO went to the Hall of Fame last year.
Yeah.
I think I might message you. It's just like Scott Hall doesn't look 100%. Do you know what I mean?
You did. And it was obvious as well, unfortunately. When we'd seen all the great work done by Dallas, and this video, I'm sure it's going to be called Tribute to Scott Hall. But
oh, absolutely.
As a hero of mine, Scott Hall, and seeing him have more great years and, you know, rehabilitated years.
Yeah,
I want to make a very short tribute to Dallas because the work he's done.
Lots of what he did, like, forget Mother Teresa. Let's applaud DDP. You had to do it, didn't you?
No, like that man is that man has gave one of the guys that I grew up admiring more years with his life, his family, his friends, because he literally gave him probably 10 years of his life. I'm not even exaggerating.
No, you're not. I agree.
He literally turned his life around, and you've got to give props to that. And he's done it with Jake, and he's done it with lots of great wrestlers as well. You know, he's a great guy. He really just genuinely seems to be a great guy. But touching back on your point, George, when you saw Scott at the Hall of Fame, you're right. We thought Dallas had kind of solved the puzzle, but there were signs again that he wasn't himself.
Then I've read on, I think it was an interview that he did, and apparently lockdown, he wasn't coping very well. Just being isolated and just like being on his own, and just, you know, like, this isn't here. We don't want to harp on it and talk about negative, because like, no one's perfect. Like, I mean, we wouldn't shame him for that at all. Like, we still love the guy. I mean, we're not friends with him. We weren't, but we looked up to him. He was a hero to both of us, and we actually got to meet him a couple of years ago when the NWO did a UK tour, which I think I mentioned in the beginning. And it was Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, and Kevin Nash. and it was poorly organised. I think it was Ministry of Slam. I can't remember the venue. It was actually quite a long time ago now, and it was just before the Hall of Fame. When the first Hall of Fame, which I really want to talk about in a minute, because that's what I want to remember Scott Hall for, and that the epic line that everyone was quoting all week long, which I will sign off with from the show. But the show itself, I went with you and my brother, who actually got me into wrestling. Alex, shout out if you've watched this episode. Thank you very much. And the show itself, I mean, if you can tell the listeners how your experience was, and I can just sort of add to it.
Oh, it was so cool. Like, as you say, the organisation was shocking.
It was terrible.
And had this not been seeing 3 guys that legitimately changed the business, I would have been frustrated. But nothing was bringing me down on that night, meting these guys and telling them to their faces.
The last train, like it was,
what it meant to us to to have had them matches and growing up with their entertainment. And I genuinely told Scott that he was my favourite.
You did. You did.
You know, you asked me to make sure I did that, and I'm really pleased that I did.
Yeah.
And he was like, everyone's favourite is Hogan. And I said, no. I said, in the NWO, you were my favourite. I said, you started it all. And he didn't have an awful lot to say. And I'm not saying he was a shy character.
No. But, I mean, it probably didn't help that it was a massive.
But he just seemed very humble.
But you can tell, like, what you said meant a lot to him.
Yeah, and it seemed like not many people would be sort of signalling him out as one of the better guys in the group, and I'm shocked by that.
Yeah.
Because to me, like I said, Monday Night Wars, the first few weeks was carried by Scott Hall, and then Nash joined in. Yeah. And if you'd put, as Booker said, Savio Vega, I mean, that's just a name, but if you'd put anyone in the ring.
So there's nothing against Savio, by the way.
I'll go with Lex Luger. If you'd put Lex Luger in the ring.
Oh, can I just mention this, by the way? I hated Lex Luger in the Wolfpack. I like Lex Luger. I'm a big fan. Got his autograph and everything. But in the Wolfpack, hated it. Just wasn't natural. So it was kind of crazy.
I thought Lex was your hero.
Mate, Lex Express, I will stick up for. I'll be your hero.
No, I've seen your signing when you
boy. It's on my YouTube channel, by the way, if anyone wants to see it. Me getting that virtual signing with Lex Luger. Quite cool, actually.
Very good stuff.
But yeah,
this is again, no dig at Lex Luger, no dig at anybody else, but it took a big charismatic character who really bought the gimmick. Mm-hmm. And had already experienced what it's like to be a heel, but has to still get over the crowd. And how he took over the Monday Night Wars intro was just special, as we touched on earlier.
It was.
But meeting those guys, I've still got the photo. I'm sure you've still got the photo. I've got the signed NWO top.
Yeah, you've actually got that sign framed. Is it in your place or your parents' place?
It's kept away safely. It's at my parents in their loft. It's nice and safe because the signatures have danger of rubbing off, and I'm not allowing that to happen. So,
mate, you got to be well careful with that.
That's it. So that's tucked away safe. I mean, look, I do remember them all signing it extremely drunk, which is funny.
Mostly Nash. I mean, I'm not going to lie, the signatures aren't actually very good because I'm using some really shit pen, like a silver pen. Yeah. No, yours is gold, wasn't it? I think yours is gold or silver. I can't remember.
I can't remember now, mate.
Yeah, I remember you getting it signed, but obviously
all I know is that Nash is going, I'm not sure if his pen's working, and Waltman's holding the shirt to my chest going, just sign his fucking shirt, man. It was so cool.
And I felt bad, man. Like I'm just, this is the sort of first time telling this story. Like I'm not been in a negative light, but like I think because they were pissed off how it was organised, I don't know if they actually did it ultimately for free because they knew there was fans there, because by the time they arrived, I don't think they got paid in full. I don't think that. I don't know the full arrangements, but I know everyone got fucked over, not just the fans. But the guy faked a heart attack, and there was things to it. There might be some UK listeners that actually might have been there or know about this. If there are, reach out to me. My details are in the description below. Please subscribe. But yeah, so it was probably one that Nash was drinking this massive bottle of wine next to Hall, and like this is when I think he's just come out DDP. I was like, but I mean, maybe it's a test, but you know, I don't think he's doing it malicious. I remember seeing that, but I remember Nash was, I think he was a bit hammered, and like you said, he was trying to sign that shit pen. I just don't think he was in the best of moods because I think they're just like, we're not probably get paid for this, are we?
Well, this is the thing. It went late. It was poorly organised. To pay.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, we missed the last fucking train. I mean, like, we had to drop everything.
these guys did not let down their fans,
No,
and that's I
no,
would
I think that's
acknowledge.
one thing
The audience, the organisers certainly let us down that night, but them
Yep.
three guys certainly didn't.
It
Let us
was
down
their
that night.
last show, I believe. I think they went out of business after that. Ministry of Slam. If anyone knows
There
what
you
happened
go.
to them, please comment below, because I've actually tried to do some digging to find out what happened to them, but yeah, I couldn't actually find out. I've read some more stories about the owner. Can't remember his name. Don't really care that much anymore. But to be honest, I've got lifetime memory out of it now. Even the actual event when they did the Q&A and they were telling stories, that was fun. I kept shouting Virgil. It's actually on YouTube, by the way. It's on YouTube. Some fans uploaded it. I think they're filming it on their phone, and
You
you
send
hear
me
me
the
do
link
it
ASAP
twice.
because that
It's like,
moment was amazing.
what
Booger
about
calls for Virgil, and Kevin Nash goes, "Why do you want Virgil?" And it was just excellent. It was amazing.
It's just I was loud enough just for them to hear it. It was brilliant, man. Oh
Just
man,
put it into context. We're a very long way away at this point, right? They're doing their introductions,
yeah.
and Booger shouts out Virgil. It was a moment, guys. It really was.
I can't remember. It's like, who's your favorite like NWO member? I was like, Virgil. I did
We've,
it
we've
one too
been
many
in
times
the
though.
event. We've been
The
in the
first
event
two,
probably
three
about 5
times
minutes.
it worked, and then I did it and then I did it one or two, three times, and just like I was like, okay, shut
We've been in the event, haven't we, about 5 minutes. And the fact that we've been in there 5 minutes, everyone's marking out seeing these guys in the flesh. And Booker has his name acknowledged by Kevin Nash immediately. That's pretty cool. I'm not going to lie.
yeah, true. That I was just like, Virgil. I think if any of the listeners, like, that have listened to me since from like day one or whatever, anytime Virgil's mentioned, I'm just gonna crack up. Like, I'd love to get him on, but I don't want to like. Yeah, I'll probably end up like giving him like 10 grand or something, or something bad will happen to me if I was to arrange Virgil to come to the show, and I don't want to put myself through it. Like,
I think we've got to try it.
I'll keep the myth up because there's a reason why it's Lonely Virgil. Like, yeah, he's a funny fucker though. Like, fuck money and
There's a lot of memes and people around about prices for signings and stuff. We'll leave it at that.
yeah.
But yeah, he's made a bit
That's
of a
what we
name
have
for
to
himself.
mention as well, right? A lot of shows, right, these days when you go to conventions, meet and greets, or whatever, and even with this wrestler, and they're so expensive. We paid for what we paid, right? Don't get me wrong, it's poorly organised, but I look back and smile, knowing that I met like my childhood heroes for £30, and that's including the photo, the show, the Q&A, let me try this again. A professional photo and autographs. I think I got 2 signatures, and if you got a T-shirt signed, I mean that if that was to happen like last year or something when they're all round, that would never be that price. Like, you're probably about 200 at least, if that.
At
I mean,
least.
at the fucking lowest amount.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, we're here talking about Scott and talking about his memory, and that's one of our memories with Scott. And you can't put a price on that. He's no longer with us. This is unfortunately, he's no longer with us. It's.
But I look back and smile at the show.
Yeah, this is it, and it's memories, isn't it? And anyone watching the show, I'm sure there'll be people watching the show that have met, wrestling legends, and maybe even Scott Hall himself. Just think about now. You've had that experience, and you got to thank that guy for what he gave to your career and your childhood and your memories.
Especially you, because he was like your number one. Like, and I remember like you were so not nervous, but you were so like, I can't believe it's happening. And I was so happy to see that exchange. I mean, I was happy myself, but I think I said to Kevin Nash, like, I tried to be funny and mention Magic Mike, and he literally sold it.
There's another thing as well when you hear on wrestling that people aren't really their height. Well, I'm a good 6'3", and Kevin Nash is a giant of a man. I'll tell you that for a fact. He's a big guy.
Yeah, some people are very like Jericho surprised me. Like, I think he's the same height as me, but on TV, like, he looks like he just really carries himself like a star. But that's a different person. But yeah, just a few things to mention. Then I will wrap the show up because I think we had a laugh and a good catch up. And I think I'm really surprised that we've been able to speak this long already in a way about someone. Just was just some people like go, oh, just a wrestler. Oh, you didn't, he wasn't your friend. Like, I saw him week in, week out for like multiple years, not just.
Well, what people need to remember is, in the 90s, we're like what, a year apart in age. For the 90s, we're growing up in the same era, and we're children, and we're growing into like young adults. And these people influence us.
Yeah,
and not to influence us to go out and do razors edges on people, but I'm saying these people will influence us to like, they're people you look up to, and wrestling, it is entertainment, and people want to go, it's fake, it's real, whatever. You take a wrestling move and it hurts. It's called taking a bump. You take a bump and it hurts. But what I'm going to say is that these people put injury, even life on the line. Owen Hart, people like that you've mentioned, who were unfortunately lost due to tragic accidents.
Yeah, yeah.
They put their life on the line to entertain and role
Every time they
model
step out there, just literally
young
one move
children.
can go wrong. Like look at Droz, paralysed.
Well, this is it. This is what I'm saying. And Scott Hall was doing the moves, he was doing things right, and he was getting booed and getting cheered, but he was loving. And he even spoke about it in a recent talk before, obviously, he passed. That he said, I walked out in front of, say, 60,000 people, and I'm one of the reasons they're there. That's pretty cool. That's a feeling I want to bottle and never lose. And he appreciated his fans. That tells you right there. And we appreciated him, and we'll miss him greatly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there is still like things we just haven't touched on, like the fact that Crow Sting, which took off, and another reason why WCW were beating WWE, that was because of Scott Hall came up with the idea. Like just little things like that. And apparently, like he was so creative. I think even Kevin Nash was saying in interviews, like there's one person who should work as a creative, who would you pick? He always say Scott Hall. He was so creative when his mind was focused. And he would actually help a lot of people as well. And I think I said earlier about his selling and look, the click wasn't always positive sometimes, but at the same time they were mates. And I respect that. Your mate's got your back, got your back. And in some way, sometimes it could be toxic, but at the same time, they had each other's backs. And I respect that about them. Like, the curtain call.
Yeah. But the curtain call is another big one. I mean, if you can talk about memories of Scott Hall, obviously he's part of the curtain call, and the curtain call is obviously faces and heels together in front of a live audience, probably like the first time in WWF.
Yeah.
And
they wanted their moment. They wanted to say goodbye.
Vince blew his lead, but to them, as you just mentioned, friends come first, and they wanted to give that moment to each other, and they did it. And it cost Triple H some years of his career at the top level. So he wanted to get back to the top.
He suffered for a good few months. Basically, the King of the Ring got taken away from him. But I think it was after SummerSlam, he actually, I think it was Survivor Series. I can't remember the specific date, but he'd go on to beat Mark Mero for the IC title. And then obviously he would go on to eventually win the King of the Ring the year later. And then, the rest is history about him. But it's just one thing as well, just as I will actually officially wrap this up in a minute, is mentioning how we had that moment. We got to meet Scott Hall, and we've got his autograph and the memories, and just you got to say, I'm glad you're in a good place now, and you're basically my favorite. And I can tell that meant a lot to you. But one thing I saw is the outpouring on social media. Other than one or two dickheads, I'm not going to mention them or give them any airtime, but it was the outpouring. How many people actually got photos of him? Not just fans, but wrestlers and talent and legends, and just everyone had a story. It was fucking awesome just to see it.
There's a story you actually told me, which I didn't know, because I asked you what the tribute was about. But there was a big outpour of love and disappointment, obviously, with the news from Paige, who's obviously a British-based wrestler. Yeah. And you said that there was a lot of relations with him and their family, and he hoped with training Paige and her brother and things like that. And I didn't know that, and that's really cool, because you look at people like Paige.
I thought this was going to be a bad story.
No. You talk about people like Paige giving a tribute.
Yeah.
Like Hulk Hogan, who and Kevin Nash, who are obviously his best friends. But you look at that range through all the eras of wrestling, and he's got respect from all of the eras. You've got Zack Ryder, who was another massive fan of his, because obviously he had the IC title moment at Mania, and
I love that. The picture in '94. WrestleMania 10, and then the photo when Zack Ryder wins.
And he was like, I'm so happy I won that belt at Mania. So it reminded me of Scott, and Scott took a picture with me with my belt, and it meant so much to him, you could tell. And he reminded me almost of myself when I met Scott. It was like a young fan who just admired him. Yeah. And that's another wrestler in the business. And that's the impact and the legacy that he's left on the current roster.
Yeah, the amount of people that are doing just little things like the smooth walk. Yeah, apparently he actually did that to avoid fans, and then it came a trademark. I can't do it properly because I'm sitting down.
I never knew that.
But what if you get bored? Even just the listeners and yourself, I don't know if you've seen it yet. It just got uploaded for free. KC Shoots, Sean Oliver. Yeah, he uploaded the Scott Hall one, and it's fantastic. It's about 2.5 hours long, but it's brilliant. It's basically a lot of the fact. It's most of it is Q&A and who's a dick and stuff like that. And it's really funny. If you do get time, if you're not sure what to watch and you want to listen to Scott Hall talk as opposed to some old interviews, watch that. It was after the Hall of Fame. And it's a really good interview. You can tell he's in a really good place as well. He's just always, he's naturally cool, and he oozes machismo. Like,
I love watching interviews with Scott where he's older but he's got his life back, because it means so much to see the last years.
That's how I wanted to sort of end this, but I'm glad you've just mentioned it. But I'll let you continue.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, towards the end, of course, months before he passed, we were hearing through other wrestlers and that he was just having bad problems again, bad health issues. And that comes with the years of, I will say it, the years of abuse of, alcohol and substances. We've all been there.
I mean, like, he had that thing back in mind. He killed someone, didn't he?
Well, we haven't touched on that, but I mean, I don't know if that's something that really...
Not really. I don't want to.
But,
I mean, if you've seen the documentary on him, if you've watched a few interviews, you'll kind of know the story of it.
It's deep. It's deep. ESPN, again, another quick plug for the ESPN video. That is all in that video, the information on that.
Yeah.
And it may well have, I'm not going to quote it, may well have been the start of some of the hard times in Scott's life, was dealing with that. But yeah, just wrapping up on the bit I was mentioning just then, obviously about the good times and stuff. Scott, he would have had his bad times in the last few months. Most people ill and close to their unfortunate end are not healthy. But with Dallas's help, with his own willpower, with his own mindset, wanting to be closer to his son again, we see a lot about the relationship he rebuilt with his son. With the support, I'm sure, everlasting love from Waltman and Nash, who are like brothers to Scott.
No, Kevin Nash's Instagram post out. Oh my God, reading that in the morning, that broke me. That
was the first thing I saw about this, and I called my mum, who, little quick shout out, is a bit of a wrestling fan. It's someone's mum.
Yeah, she loves her
90s wrestling, and she actually got a little bit teary on the phone because she knew from my meeting of Scott Hall, and as we all grew up watching him, and I'd be doing my toothpick flicks and I'll be doing razors edges on my school.
I wish I had toothpicks, but I was actually busy at work and I couldn't leave.
She knew that that would have meant a lot to me. And not touching on this in any detail, but we also recently went through a loss in the family, and it was just another kind of reminder that someone can just go like that, and you've got to cherish your friends, cherish your family, cherish your role models, and
cherish your memories. Life's short.
Yeah, make memories and not waste time, because when Scott got back on the mend, I'm sure he would have hoped for a little bit more. I know hundreds of times he said, I should have been dead 100 times, and maybe, but it wasn't right. It wasn't his time. And look, I'd like to think he found peace with himself. He lived plenty of lifetimes, in my opinion. He had the best.
Got to see his son wrestle. I mean, his son was in New Japan with the Bullet Club. He got to be inducted to the Hall of Fame not once but twice. He got to appear on specific like multiple episodes of like Raw and SmackDown. Got his own DVD documentary, which I really enjoyed. Appeared in The Click and multiple other documentaries. He got a second life DVD because of DVD. And like, it wasn't just, Scott Hall passed away, like way before the Hall of Fame, and then you're inducting him when he wasn't there. He got that moment, and the speech, I'm going to quote, it's going to be the last one I say, and everyone knows what I'm going to say, but it was only... It was only about 5 minutes, but he didn't want to talk too much. He really didn't. And didn't help that Mr. T talks about his mum for like 45 minutes. I
find it hard to criticise anyone in the Hall of Fame, because everyone thinks differently about how they should approach things. I know other wrestlers, people say other ones deserve it more than others, but Mr. T wasn't a wrestler, but he created some mania moments, so you've got to give him his due.
If we're talking about just like the celebrity part, whatever, he 100% deserves it. 100%. Yeah. I'm not really the biggest fan of Celebrity Wing, but if we have to induct some people, Mr. T, Mike Tyson, and Rodman they're the first in, and we will get those Rodman in one day.
Rodman is part of the NWO. Rodman would have been,
mate, watch that match.
Relationship with Hall, and I think Rodman, in my opinion, is the best non-wrestler in wrestling. I think his bit in the NWO was incredible. I think he fit in. You got to think, in the 90s, he was the name in basketball. He was the name, like him and Jordan.
I might do a Twitter poll on this after this episode comes out, because I'm trying to think.
No one vote for Bad Bunny, please. I know he's a good wrestler.
I love Bad Bunny.
I know he's a good wrestler. I know he wrestled well in his match.
And Damien Priest,
Johnny Knoxville, or anyone like that. Dennis Rodman was an active NWO.
I might say Bad Bunny, but I'm normally an old school fan, but I love Bad Bunny, and I thought that's probably my favourite celebrity match. I really like Lawrence Taylor against Bam Bam Bigelow, WrestleMania 11. We're going well off topic.
Minority.
If you, this is the thing is, if you agree, just tweet out me. If you don't, then fuck off. But no, that's cool. No, that's cool. So so I think we've had a full blown conversation about Scott's career, moments that we personally have had when we first were introduced to the bad guy. I mean, the guy's he's so quotable, man.
The vignettes just created that character.
Oh, no, I miss vignettes. I really do. I actually said that in the conversation.
I'll clear the table for you, man.
Bad man. Right. Ryan, can you please, as your send off, do the quote that you haven't done in years? You used to do it to me all the time. Ric Flair, WWF title celebration, 1992. It's on YouTube if anyone hasn't seen it. Let me know if Ryan nails it. Ryan, if you can, do it as best as you can, mate.
Give it a go. So Ric Flair's got the title, him and Perfect and Bobby Heenan are popping some bottles, and Razor walks in and hey Razor, and he comes over and they're talking, made a champ reign forever. But you got to remember, Ric Flair's just beat Randy Savage. It's too bad about Randy Savage, man. That happens, and Booker loves it, and they talk. There's another one of Scott Hall's good little tandems on telly was the Ric Flair tag team.
Oh, what with the promo build up to Survivor Series?
Quite short lived in WWF, but they had good chemistry. Quite enjoyed it.
I actually really like that match, to be honest. It's a fun match. But no, I can't do impression because I end up sounding like the Rock.
You've asked for two from me now. So what your fans want is they want you to sign off with your quote. So
I was just gonna say, survey says we're gonna miss Scott Hall. Thank you for the memories, the matches. I mean, my favourite match, Scott Hall. It's the popular answer. It's Shawn Michaels ladder match, WrestleMania 10. Perfect match. And then I'd probably say Bret Hart, King of the Ring 93, which is a superb match, which opens up the show. But yeah, I think it's been a good tribute show. Brian, thank you for coming on again. I always say this and I mean it. I will have you back. We can talk about celebrities in WrestleMania or something like that. Some absolute bollocks. Who knows? But we always have a good time when you're here. But I'll keep in touch with you and I'll send you a message after we have finished this.
I think we can all agree that the loss of Scott Hall is a sad time. It's a bad time. Bad times don't last.
Nah.
Bad guys do.
Right. Just so you know, hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do. Thank you, Scott Hall. Absolutely. There's going to be more episodes of What Do You Call It podcast coming out very soon. But for now, everyone, sweet. Lights, camera, action. Hello there. I've got a special announcement for my next guest.
Yeah. Hey, this is WWE Hall of Famer Bret the Hitman Hart, and you're listening to What Do You... Wait.
I was going to keep...
Hey, this is Jay George, and you're not listening. You're going to listen to What Do You Call It? What Do You Call It podcast.
The following podcast is brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at wrestlingwithjohners.com.